So for this first problem, we are going to try doing it both ways. We are going to solve, we're solving for x. That's the only variable that we see, so that is what we are going to be solving for. So when we look at this, if we're trying to factor, you always get all terms on one side if they aren't already. So we would have x squared minus 13x plus 40, right? If you add 10 to both sides, 30 plus 10 gets you 40, equals 0. Once all terms are on one side, you look for a, b, and c. So a is the number in front of x squared, so we know a is 1. B is the value in front of x, so we know it's negative 13. And c is the constant number by itself, 40. So remember, when we're factoring, we're looking for combinations of numbers that multiply to a times c. So 1 times 40 that add to b. So that add to your b value. So that adds negative 13. So that combo is negative 8 and negative 5. They both multiply to positive 40 and they add to negative 13. Once you have those factors, we can write x minus 8, x minus 5 is equal to 0. Now I know that I factored correctly because if I were to FOIL, right, if I went x times x is x squared, x times negative 5 is negative 5x, negative 8 times x is negative 8x, negative 8 times negative 5 is 40. When I simplify, I'll get my original trinomial. So I know that I factored correctly. So there's no more steps, like some of the harder ones when a is not 1. So once you fully factored, right, you set both of your factors equal to 0 and solve. So we write x minus 8 equals 0. So we add 8 to both sides, and we get x equals 8. Then we look at the second one, and we set x minus 5 equal to 0. And when we add 5 to both sides, we have x equals 5. Notice they're different values. X is 8 and x is 5. There are two different x values. You're always going to have two values. Sometimes they might be the same number. Sometimes they both might be positive. Some might both be negative. Maybe sometimes it'll say 8 and negative 8. Don't just always assume it's one thing. You always want to make sure that you're following the steps. So remember, step 1, all terms on one side. Check. Step 2, a is in front of x squared, b is in front of x, c is number by itself. Check. Factor. Check. Set factors to 0. Check. Solve, and you get your solutions. Check. Okay, now we're going to solve the same problem using the quadratic formula. So remember, the quadratic formula is when we have x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, some things that we've noticed where people have been making some mistakes is when you are going to this problem and you're going to be inserting numbers into the variable spot, you need to use parentheses. A lot of people aren't using their parentheses. So when you're inserting a number in the B spot, you need parentheses, and you put the number there in the A spot, and the C, and the A. Notice all of those other negatives are still there. Like that negative is in front of the yellow parenthesis. This negative and the 4 are in front of that parenthesis, right? Okay, so let's practice plugging those values in. So we know, I'm going to write the general formula first, and I'll leave blank spots for the variables. So we have negative, we'll insert b there, plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Notice I'm not writing those letters that I was saying because I'm going to plug in the number, substitute. So in the b spot, we're going to be plugging in negative 13, wherever we saw b. Wherever we see a, we're going to be plugging in 1. And wherever we see letter C, we are going to plug in 40, right? This was negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so don't forget those parentheses. Then, next step, we are going to continue. So we will have x equals, the double negatives right here turn positive, so we have 13 plus or minus the square root of, let's see, so we know negative 13 squared is negative 13 times negative 13, which is positive 169. Then we know that, then we know that negative 4 times 1 times 40 is going to get us negative 160. So then we have 13 plus or minus square root of 9 over 2, right? Because 169 minus 160 gets us 9. Then the square root of 9 is 3. So we have x equals 13 plus or minus 3 all over 2. Now, another thing that people are forgetting is you need to consider the two answers, right? Some people just stop there, or they do other things. So let's look at this. So we would have x equals 13 plus 3 all over 2, which would get us 16 over 2, which would get us 8. So that would be one answer. And then our other answer would be, if we're using the minus, right, we would have x equals 13 minus 3 all over 2. So x is 10 over 2, which is 5. So notice we get 8 and 5, and those are the same answers as if we were factoring. Because we're solving the same problem, we're finding the values for x, we're just using two different methods. So you need to be able to do whatever method is asked for. And in the future, sometimes when you get stuck and, for example, you're not able to factor, you can use quadratic formula. But right now we want to make sure you can do both. Okay, let's try one more. And then remember, you're going to be writing all these down, the ones we do together. You're going to copy them. That shows you're watching the video, and then you're going to try the other ones on your own. So let's look at this first one for number 2. So all terms are on one side. We have a is 9, b is 12, c is negative 5. There's no GCF, right? No factors that come out. So now we're going to try to factor. We're looking for a combo that multiplies to a times c. So 9 times negative 5, that's a times c, which is negative 45, that adds to b, that adds to 12. So let's think about this for a sec. Let's see, so a combo that multiplies to negative 45, right, a times c, that adds to b, that adds to 12, would be some combo of 3 and 15. So we know there's a 3, we know there's 15, and if they multiply to negative 45, add to positive 12, we know the 3 has to be the negative 1, or because they have to be positive 12. So we know those are our values, so we're going to write x minus 3, x plus 15 equals 0. I know if I FOIL, right, x times x is x squared, x times 15 is 15x, and so on and so forth. If I start to FOIL, I don't get 9x squared plus 12x minus 5. So that's when we know that we either factor by grouping or you do the method that I use. I'm going to use my method. So it's factors over front. By front, I mean the a value. So over 9. Simplify, swing out. So 3 over 9 simplifies to 1/3. Then we have 15 and 9 both divide by 3. So 15 divided by 3 is 5. 9 divided by 3 is 3. And then if there's a denominator, it swings out in front of the x. So we would have 3x minus 1, 3x plus 5 equals 0. And then your last step is you set your factors equal to 0 and solve. So we'll have 3x minus 1 equals 0. 3x plus 5 equals 0. So add 1 to the left one, so we get 3x equals 1. Divide by 3. We have x equals 1/3, so that's one of the values. For the other one, we subtract 5. So we have 3x equals -5. Divide by 3. So we have x equals -5/3. Those are our two values. Now, we're going to solve the same problem. We should get the same answer using quadratic formula. So again, the quadratic formula is x equals -b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac, all under the radical, all over 2a. So let's plug this stuff in. So x equals negative. I'm going to do parentheses like this first. Plus or minus, parentheses for b squared minus 4, parentheses for a, parentheses for c, all over 2 parentheses for a. Going to plug in the values. So we know in the b slot, it's going to be 12, right? If we come back over here, b is 12. So that goes there and there. We know that a is 9. And we know in the c slot, we write -5. So if we continue, we would have x equals -12 plus or minus square root. 12 squared is 144. And then when we have -4 times 9 times -5, we're going to get positive 180. 2 times 9 is 18. So 144 plus 180 is 324. And then the square root of 324 is 18. So we would have -12 plus or minus 18 all over 18. Now you can't just cross out these 18s, right? If there's plus or minus in between values, you can't just do that. So we need to solve both. So all first add. So we have x equals -12 plus 18 all over 18. So we have x equals -12 plus 18 is 6 over 18 is 1/3. Then if we do the other one, we subtract, we'll have x equals -12 minus 18 over 18. So x is -30 over 18, which then simplifies to -5 over 3. And notice those are the same answers that we got, right? 1/3 and -5/3, 1/3, -5/3, same answer whether you factor or use quadratic formula. So you're going to make sure you write all those down. You're going to try the other ones, submit it. We'll be on Zoom, and email if you have questions. Have a good day.